Criminal records are a plague for many of South Africa's youth trying to change their lives for the better and find employment, with past mistakes often contributing to the country's high youth unemployment rate. Now, this is according to Linda Thahane, who is the director of Jotela Mtika Consulting, a firm which provides services such as vetting and other services. Now, Linda believes that there are other ways to empower our youth without punishing them further for past mistakes. And Linda Thahane joins us now to have a conversation about this very important subject. Linda, thanks so much for coming through. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning, Sakina, and good morning to your viewers. Thank you for having me.
So you and I have been going back and forth about this discussion for a very long time, but I think the one thing that we agree on is that it is a very important topic, especially as it pertains to our youth and job seeking. We often talk about the high unemployment stats for young people, but we don't necessarily zoom into some of the root causes of that, and criminal records is one of those. And you have said that this is one of the reasons how these criminal records plague young people and actually prevent them from, in some instances, accessing job opportunities.
I agree totally, Sakina, because when you look at the Section 271B of the Criminal Procedures Act, whenever a person has been processed through the criminal justice system, they have their fingerprints processed at the police station and they go to court. Either they pay a fine at the police station or at the court. And then some of them assume that they are done with the criminal justice system and then they forget. Only to find that when they look for jobs, that is when they realize that they are flagged, that they have a criminal record. And then some would call us and say, but I was done with this 5 years ago. Some of them don't even realize that a criminal record, it's a sentence of 10 years only on the outside instead of on the inside, like prisoners who are incarcerated.
And then I can imagine the frustration at a point where someone is now seeking employment and they're not aware, and suddenly they're told, no, but you have a criminal record. And you can imagine that sometimes this will push people back into criminal activity because they feel like they've hit a wall.
Exactly, Sakina, because when you look at the rate of recidivism in this country, that is reoffending, you find that it is a number of it's young people who are frustrated with the system and they become despondent and not knowing whether to start businesses, or sometimes even when they try to start businesses, they are vetted by these SMME funders, and some of them do not qualify to get that funding. So at the end of the day, they end up saying, well, I'm hungry and I cannot observe the law, so it's better for me to commit crime because I don't know what this government is doing. And sometimes, Sakina, you find that it's a minor offense of boarding a train without a ticket, where they get a fine of 100 rands or 50 rands, but then they have to wait 10 years to have that record expunged. That's where the crux of the matter is.
So let's talk about that, because as you say, sometimes it would be misdemeanors, other times, you know, it's a matter of someone was maybe going through a phase, maybe they were abusing drugs at a certain point and were caught in possession, whatever the case may be.
Yes.
And they are now trying to turn their lives around. They are still young, still in the prime of their lives. What do they do?
Sakina, I would say if you check the statistics, you will find that a lot of young people or a lot of ex-offenders are between the ages of 18 to 35. That is the majority. So most of them, you find that their motivations for committing crime at that age differ as they mature in age. So you find that now they are responsible, they have families, they have kids that depend on them, and they've walked away from that life of offending, of juvenile delinquency and stuff. That is where now the problem starts, where they need to get jobs, meaningful jobs, because all companies now, they vet their employees.
So how do we assist? You know, what can be done? As you say, this record will be on the books for a period of 10 years, you say.
Yes.
So is there anything that can be done prior to that 10-year period?
You know, Sakina, I would argue that it would be ideal if the key stakeholder departments in the government, that is justice and SABC, as well as maybe social development. But what I'm asking for is a multifaceted approach to look at this thing of criminal record clearances, because I feel that 10 years is too long for a misdemeanor. But if it was like maybe for violent offenders, like your Schedule 6 type of offenders, then that would be. Because if you look at these people who have committed misdemeanors, it's not something, I'm not condoning it, but it's not something that would raise hairs, you know. But then it prohibits them from getting jobs. And employers zoom in on that and stay there. They do not even check as to whether this particular person was put before court and the matter was withdrawn. Let me give you a perfect example. You have somebody who would be brought before court and the matter is withdrawn or is dismissed. Now the investigating officer has a duty to do the record of trial and put it in the docket and file it at the local criminal record center. Some of the investigating officers don't do that. So the poor offender or the Mr. X will be stuck with a criminal record, and when the employers vet, they will say, you have cases awaiting trial or cases pending, go sort it out. And sometimes you find that people migrate from the rural areas to Joburg. So with our Durban office, we've realized that some of the ex-offenders, they are from Durban and they are working here. So now it's time again to go and reconcile the documents on that other side of Durban.
So how can we come to the assistance of someone who's perhaps watching now and saying, this is exactly my predicament right now. I did something when I was 17, 18 years old. I'm now 25, 26, 28 years old, 30 years old. I'm trying to move on with my life. I'm trying to stay on the straight and narrow, but I can't because I'm being blocked from accessing employment opportunities or funding opportunities through government enterprises.
Yes.
So what do I do?
Okay, when you look at the process or the administrative process that is involved, everything starts with a police clearance certificate. That is where we obtain the case number and be able to ascertain the date of sentence. That is where we look at the 10-year waiting period, whether it is complete or not. Because doing it prematurely will simply have the application rejected. But then when it is like an anniversary of the 10 years, then we are able to look at the merits of the application and ascertain whether this person needs an application for presidential pardon, which is specifically for offenders who have served a term in prison, or a J744 application, which I can term a straight expungement. Yes.
So let's talk about those two different applications. Straight expungement.
Yes.
So what sort of crimes, what sort of sentences would fall under that?
Okay. When you look at the straight expungement, you would look at somebody who has paid a fine of between 0 rand to 20,000. Somebody who got a suspended sentence, be it 2 years, 5 years, and then somebody who got a caution and discharge, which some people also neglect to look at it as a record, as a conviction. And then also it would be somebody who was given, I think let's look at these three. So that would be a straight expungement. Then it will be processed with the Department of Justice, and then a notification will be sent to the SABC at National Office to issue an expungement letter to say the criminal record has been expunged. But then with regard to application for presidential pardon, it's a whole new different ballgame, because now there has to be testimonials from people of authority in the community, such as your councillor, your church, your priest or pastor, and maybe business people who believe in you that you have done well since you have been released on parole. So the most important thing is that a person who has been released on parole needs to finish their correctional supervision, sign everything and be done with correctional services. Only then can the criminal record be expunged. Because remember, parole has conditions whereby if the offender is maybe if he offends, then he will be remanded in custody. So now it is important that the offender observes the parole conditions.
All right.
Yes.
So the presidential pardons, is that something that people can do directly themselves, or are they better off employing the services of other entities to assist in that regard?
Yes, entities like myself and other companies in the space of vetting can also be able to assist, but they can also approach the department and do it themselves. Some of them complain that when they do it on their own, they get the wrong application forms and stuff like that. So hence we're able to explain the process further.
So, you talk about a multifaceted approach to some of these problems.
Yes.
And we look at the escalating levels of crime in our society. Especially things like substance abuse.
Yes.
That is on the rise. Gangsterism. I was speaking to a friend who was telling me he was in the neighborhood that he grew up in, and 12-year-olds are essentially running the show. These are the realities in some of our communities. So can you imagine if a 12-year-old is then convicted of a serious crime, and by the time they hit 22, these
are fully fledged.
And the problems inherent in that. What should we be doing as a society, perhaps, in terms of coming up with that multifaceted approach to assist those who unfortunately are bearing the brunt of these problems?
Well, Sakina, when you look at society in general, everything starts from the family. And then it goes to the community and to society at large. So the stakeholder departments that are involved, that is police, correctional, criminal justice cluster, these are the people who can be able to zoom in on this. Recently, we were looking at crime statistics as published by the minister. I would argue that when you look at people who are displaced as a result of not having homes, like maybe ex-parolees who are displaced, it would be ideal if the Department of Social Development were to be present and engage on that subject matter to say, how can the department be able to assist these displaced parolees in order not to be homeless people? And then on the side of youth, we can maybe engage Department of Arts and Culture, to look at talents that they can harness for these young people, to look from within, to say, what is it that I can do with the energy that I have? Yes.
And just finally, employers, as you say, employers take a very hard line. They do the vetting. If something is flagged, that's it.
Yes. I would plead with employers to say, let us look at the merits of this accused. It's not nice for people to keep on explaining themselves, to say, hey, 5 years ago, I was accused of this and this is what happened. But let me say maybe a person is looking for a general worker's position to clean. That has nothing to do with whether that person was convicted for drinking and driving, because these two don't correlate. If it was maybe a driving position, then the employer would be correct to say you have a problem with alcohol. But if it's cleaning, I would say the employer can look at whether the 10-year period has lapsed or is on the verge of lapsing, and then be able to assess the person on the merits, on what they see and their commitment on the post itself.
So as a vetting consultant, as it were, if I could call you that,
yes.
When you engage with employers, do you sometimes, mitigate for some of these applicants to say, but, maybe this is not something that you should hold against said applicant?
Definitely. We did that last year with the city of Johannesburg. It was after that incorporation of security guards into the fold of the city. So when this guy realized that, hey, they're going to take us permanent and I have this matter, that is when he contacted us, and then we managed to consult the HR department at City of Johannesburg and put the matter forward to that. This matter is already in process. It will not be done over 2 weeks. There is a process that is involved, but we assure you that we will be able to forward all the feedback and the success and everything of the case. So it was done successfully and he retained his job.
Well, very, very important discussion, and I can only imagine people who find themselves in this predicament must be really frustrated. But of course, hoping that this will help them in some way to move forward and just have some hope when it comes to the expungement of these records. Linda Thahane is the director of Jotela Mtika Consulting, speaking to us about expungement of records, and in some instances where people perhaps require pardons from the presidency and how you go about that, but also just talking to these problems that arise as a result of these criminal records and how they affect young people from actually accessing job opportunities.